and Justice Affairs Committee meeting this Tuesday, September 18th. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is absent at the moment. Ms. Conwell. Here. There is a quorum.
Public comment.
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
In your packet, you have the meeting minutes of June 5th. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. 2018-0163.
Resolution number 2018-0163, authorizing an amendment to agreement number AG 15000004 with Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board of Cuyahoga County for the Adult Probation Substance Abuse Residential Treatment Program.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. The Corrections Planning Board, Court of Common Pleas is requesting moving forward with this item in the amount of $500,000. The reason it is in front of you and only $500 and not $500,001, and we didn't take it to the Board of Control, is we wanted to highlight to the council that this is an item of concern moving forward. RSAT, Residential Substance Abuse Treatment, provides funding for justice-involved clients who are opioid addicted, requiring long-term substance treatment. We've been fortunate in the past, through the benevolence of council, to have around $800,000 of council dollars a year for this, which we were able to augment with state Smart Ohio funds. The Smart Ohio funds were eliminated in the last budget, and due to cuts to the court, what was $1 million a year line item, at least since I've been at the Corrections Planning Board, is now dropping down to $500,000 over 2 years. The reason we're just bringing it to your attention and not saying we need more money today is because of changes in Medicaid. We believe that we will be okay through June 30th of 2019. However, when the new state fiscal year starts, and depending upon who is governor and what happens with Medicaid, we may find ourselves in a serious crisis as it comes to this type of treatment for people in the justice system. So we're just basically putting forth as a crier early on this particular item, asking you to consider it, and please be aware, we hopefully will have more information as we move closer to budget time. But in this time next year, we may be saying we're totally out of money. There's no more state grants to cover it, and Medicaid could possibly be changing again where it won't be able to fill the gap like it is this year.
All right. Marty, can we have your name for the record, please?
I'm sorry, Marty Murphy, Court of Common Pleas, Corrections Planning Board.
Question for Ms. Murphy. Yes, ma'am.
So through the chair to Marty, so that you talked about the funds going down, so 500,000 for 2 years. Is that total together or 500,000 each year?
It's 500,000 for 2 years. It's 250 a year. Where in the past we've been working on right at $1 million a year. As I said, we're fortunate there was a change in the IMD rule this year. Basically, if a facility has more than 16 beds, they can now bill Medicaid. And Ohio is a state that has done Medicaid expansion. Both of those things could change with this November's election. Those would impact us next June 30th. So instead of $1 million, 800,000 of which used to come from HHS levy funds, we will truly be at 250,000 of HHS levy funds a year. It's a big drop. We're not feeling it right now because of what happened with Medicaid this year.
Okay. And I guess how many beds does this cover?
It depends on how long someone is in a bed. The average residential bed cost approaches $180 a day. A couple facilities, $181 a day, but it's in that range.
Okay.
And those particular beds, it's for 30 hours of treatment a week.
Okay, so this is what we normally give. That's what's in this contract now.
This is the-
It's not any an additional ask to what we've already
No,
given.
no, this is this year's and next year's money. Last year, we had $1 million between Smart Ohio and HHS levy money. We've stretched it out, like I said, we had Smart Ohio, which brought us into mid-year this year.
So we definitely know there's not gonna be any Smart Ohio funds.
The state line item that out of the budget for this particular 2-year budget period, and I do not see it coming back.
Okay,
And it's part of how they made their budget.
so who lobbied for that? Do we have a lobbyist that lobbied for that? It's the first time that I heard about that.
We had conversations, and it ties into, if you look at Smart Ohio, it ties back to how many people from Cuyahoga County are in the state system. And just a few years ago, up to 24% of their population was from Cuyahoga County. We're hovering now at around 11.5% to 12%. I don't think that there's a recognition that unless you keep providing the treatment, that the numbers could go back up.
So the Smart Ohio funds was cut from everybody, every county?
It was eliminated out of the state budget for Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections to make their budget, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. Just a question on the dates, and I know that you explained about how we're using additional funding to get us through this year. But the contract, if I'm reading this correctly, is 1/1/2015 to 12/31/17, which means we want to extend this to 12/31/19, but there's been 8 months in this since this contract has ended. Is there a reason why we didn't continue it 1/1/18 to get us through to 12/31/19, asking for the same funds, but at least we would have been continuing a contract that ended?
Thank you, Councilwoman. There's probably 2 answers to that. One is we were internally at the court looking to see how we would balance our budget with this year's budget. And I had Smart Ohio dollars earlier in the year that I was spending, so I wasn't as worried about this. The second was that as the Smart Ohio dollars were drying up, we did hit the magic button and put this into on-base on May 8th. And it's taken since then to get to this committee. So in midsummer, it still hadn't had a reading in front of the executive. As Wednesday morning meetings, we started calling to try and find out what happened to it. It was located in the system, went in front of the executive, and then was scheduled here. So it's really 2 pieces. One is we held it a little bit, and then 2 is the system held it a little bit.
If I may continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you anticipate that you can overcome that so that we don't approve another contract for these services when this one expires, that we won't have that gap of 9 months? It just doesn't look good that we are approving, I think, a contract that ended and waiting 9 months and then asking for another $500,000 to continue it. Do you think you can overcome the obstacles that you had?
I believe that we will be able to overcome them on our side, yes.
The $500,000 that you're asking for now will begin when? This month is when this is approved and continue then for another 16 months?
It will actually, in terms of when this spending will begin to take place, it was June 1.
June 1.
We have not spent any of the money yet at this
Okay.
point, though.
Right. So the services have begun and people are waiting to be paid, or are you paying them with
They're waiting to be paid.
waiting to be paid? So if we've exhausted the dollars from the Smart Ohio,
We have no more smart funds at all.
so June, July, August, 90 days of services that we haven't paid for.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
So on Councilwoman's point, who is paying the individuals while there's no more Smart Ohio funds and we haven't put any more into
The
kitty?
vendors that are involved in this are anticipating that they will get paid at some point in time, and those invoices will be cleared up once this ultimately passes.
Okay, so they just have been okay with not getting paid?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay. And which organization, could you just give me an idea, a few of the organizations that are, the name of the organizations that are owed?
The specific organizations involved in this contract are Signature Health, Orca House, Community Assessment and Treatment Services, CATS, and Catholic Charities, Matt Talbot, both men and women.
Okay. Orca House, anything about their move? Because they're up in limbo, so I'm sure they,
They've been
Needed the
absorbed by
money.
Signature, which
Sure,
has much
yeah.
deeper pockets, fortunately.
okay. So they're probably upholding their cost a little bit, if not,
all
Orca would
three
have
are.
closed. Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Probably one of the delays was we were off in August, and this got to us, I believe, in June.
That was part of the
July.
entire process. One
Yeah.
piece was clearly on base, and
Right.
to paraphrase Ms. Lippman from juvenile court, it went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, in year 7, we're trying to fix that, so hopefully, our $25 million ERP project will help us out. Great confidence with that. So anyhow, thank you very much. In the previous committee, it was interesting, we had a couple Adams Board appointees, and one thing came up, and the reason it came up, so I brought it up, was when we first got elected, and it was in that first year, the state was building a mental hospital on the east side that would have been perfect for situations such as this, perfect for the problems that are inundating our courts and our communities, especially now with the opioid thing. And I think it's about time, maybe in this political year, that we get together and send a message to both the individuals who are running for governor that at least the Northeast Ohio expects to have that revisited. I don't know on what level in Columbus that was pulled, and I know there were some issues up here with Cleveland and soil samples, things like that, but to have something like that on the table and then pulled from you is just devastating, and I don't think we really appreciated then how important it would be now. So I'll probably be talking to you and your superiors as to a letter to the two individuals running for governor that is a necessity, not an ask, a necessity, considering the atmosphere in which we live today, at least in Northeast Ohio, which seems to be, at least Ohio is, but Northeast Ohio, in Ohio, is ground zero of ground zero. So anyhow, and we'll move this second reading under suspension for you so we can get this moved through.
Thank
If
you, Mr.
everybody's
Chair.
okay with that, I'll do that. Is everybody all right? Okay, I'll take a motion for resolution 2018-0163 for second reading under suspension at the next council meeting.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you very much, Marty.
Thank you.
2018-0167.
Resolution number 2018-0167, authorizing a contract with Passages Connecting Fathers and Sons Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $860,707.39 for implementation of the Cognitive Behavioral Interventions for Offenders Seeking Employment Program for the period 4/1/2018 through 6/30/2019.
Marty Murphy, Corrections Planning Board again. I may as well address the elephant right off the bat. This item is late. This particular item is a result of when the state released its budget last year, they released it incrementally, where we got pieces of different grants at different times. This was in fact and it's out of Community Corrections Act, but this in fact was a brand new award. We received it in February, brought it into the county to accept the award at that point in time. We then RFI'd for the project, went through a vendor solicitation, identified a vendor. We, at the same time, worked with the University of Cincinnati to do the training for the evidence-based practice associated with the employment programming. The only time slot they had available was in early April, ironically, or in sometime early October. Unfortunately, the state had given us a 17-month window. By the time we had accepted the grant, gone through the RFP process, selected the vendor, and had the University of Cincinnati, and we were already down to a 15-month window. So we did move forward with the grant. The anticipation is that next cycle, I think that the state will have this in their budget next year for the 2-year period. We will hopefully have a full 24 months, and we will utilize the same vendor that we started it with and mitigate a chunk of that lateness. The project itself, what it does is it takes our highest risk offenders, it puts them into a cognitive behavioral process, and then links them with training. The way that we have it structured is the vendor gets a certain amount of funding as the clients complete each subset of the cognitive behavioral, which is 31 sessions, and then they really get paid, A, when the client gets placed in a job, and then B, after they've held it for 3 months. So they're continuing with case management long after the client has received the job. We do require them to have an average employment rate or wage of $12.50 an hour, and to also, wherever possible, to have benefits. Using grant funds for the really high risk, we do have the availability to augment that salary for a 10-week get-to-know-you period with an employer in the amount of $4 an hour out of that $12.50 minimum. My understanding is at this point, the average rate that we have been hiring or getting these people employed at is around $15 an hour, but we're still very early into it.
Okay. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I appreciate the explanation for being late. That would have been my question. And it's, you know, I guess it's important that when we're audited, they look at those dates and they ask the same thing. Why is it late? And although it sounds, and it is, a good explanation, it still makes us vulnerable when we have that many of them come through, and we have 2 right off the bat that are late. It looks like a very good program. I'm thankful that we have that. Our passages connecting fathers and sons, have they been providing the services since April and are waiting again for their dollars?
They actually, in April, sent their staff to the training that the University of Cincinnati had up here. We began providing services in May. And once again, we do have books to reconcile once this is approved. We have outstanding invoices.
So they've been providing the services since May
They have been providing the
And not
services
paid.
since May.
and waiting for their payment.
Yes, ma'am. And on this one, just to be clear, again, this is one where we put it into on-base in June. So I mean, for a grant that came out and we accepted in February and did an RFP process, to have it in on-base March, April, May in 4 months is almost
Right.
unheard of.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? And again, we'll move this forward so we
Thank you,
can get
Mr.
it
Chair.
off the table. So if everybody's comfortable with moving this under suspension, I'll take a motion for 2018-0167 for second reading suspension at the next council meeting.
So move.
All in favor? Against? Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
2018-0187.
Resolution number 2018-0187, authorizing a contract with Ohio Guidestone in the amount not to exceed $646,688 for functional family therapy and functional family therapy wraparound aftercare services for the period 7/1/2018 through 6/30/2019.
Good
Ms.
afternoon,
Lippman,
Karen.
you're not late, are you, on this? We'll get that out of the way right away.
You'll get that out of the way right away. This was actually put onto OnBase on May 25th.
Yeah.
before Sarah had her baby. She has since had her baby, taking 12 weeks, and has come back, and now we're just getting there. So this
And
was,
I will take some of the responsibility because of the August recess and some of our dancing around in July.
so this,
I think we shall grant you leave.
a reprieve. Well, you know, we're always like
Oh,
way early.
it's not a day in this committee without Karen Lippman and her sunshine. Look at that. Look, huh?
That's right.
Has there
that's
been a
right.
day other than this with sunshine and Karen
Not
Lippman?
only sunshine, but just beautiful weather all around.
Very good. What do you got for us here?
So this is a contract for functional family therapy. Functional family therapy is an evidence-based best practice in-home family therapy model that we utilize for our probation youth. And it is a program, it's entirely the piece of it's entirely funded out of our Reclaim Ohio grant funds. And the other piece of this, which is the FFT wraparound, is a piece that we use through our targeted reclaim program, which is for youth that go through one of our targeted reclaim residential programs, and it's sort of an aftercare piece for them coming out to help them maintain them in the community once they've been released from that facility. So both pieces of the program are entirely funded through grant funds, and it is a continuation of what we've had previously. We've had both these programs for the last state fiscal year as well.
Questions? We're comfortable with that? And on time, you want to move this, I would assume,
If you don't mind.
because we're July 1st, so. And we'll take the hit on that. Well, if everyone's comfortable with 2018-0187 going to the full council under suspension, I'll accept the motion for 2018-0187 to the full council under suspension of the rules at the next council meeting.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now you brought some friends with you.
I did. They're going to talk first, I think.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Judge, how are you?
I'm well. I'm happy to be here today. I'm here to introduce our Director of Detention, Mr. Delbert Montgomery. He's been with us after a national search since May the 14th. Mr. Montgomery has over 17 years of experience working in both juvenile detention services and the U.S. Air Force. He brings a wealth of skills and knowledge, having worked as a line staff to an administrator in various juvenile and residential facilities in Georgia, Kansas, and Missouri. In his leadership roles, Mr. Montgomery has faced challenges very similar to what we have experienced here. High population, not enough staff, violent offenders, more staff training needs, and was able to successfully address those challenges where he was before. So we are very happy to have him here. He will be speaking on the changes that we've been making since his hiring over the course of the summer. And then Ms. Lippman, who needs no introduction, will be updating you on the state of our cost savings and budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge.
Good afternoon. I'm Delbert
Mr.
Montgomery for the record.
It is very good to see you. I don't know if you know the history of the juvenile court and this committee, but we've been through some very difficult times, and I think we've been successful in trying to right some of the ship over there and Quincy Avenue, right, Ms. Lippman?
Absolutely.
Right. So we are happy to have you here, sir.
Thank you, sir.
What's your first name?
Delbert?
Delbert.
Yes, Delbert. All right, I'll begin. The goals for the detention facility, and thank you for having us here today. The goals for the detention facility is to change detention culture and the mindset. gain confidence in the community stakeholders by operating in high moral and ethical standards, ensure adequate conditions of confinement for youth detained in the detention facility, improve morale of the detention staff, limit fiscal liability for the court by managing the facility within sound detention practices, gain compliance with the Ohio Administrative Code, and operate under national recognized standards such as ACA and JDIA, and properly manage the use of overtime and reduce that which is unjustified. I did it. How do we get there? We establish clear expectations for staff centered around the basics: performance, attendance, conduct, just basically professionalism. Redirecting poor performance, holding staff accountable, enhancing recruiting, retention, and succession planning, hiring the right people, retaining good employees, developing and mentoring staff, creating the next leaders, basically building the bench. In succession planning, we're going to be looking for the staff at the lower levels who have the potentials and skill set to move up to the administrative level. Ensure proper classification of youth in detention. House according to risk levels. Identify security threat groups such as gangs. Train staff to manage our aggressive population without compromise. Strategic planning. Further assess and identify needs. Review recent assessments and make recommendations based on what our current practices are, and develop a training plan. Changes thus far in detention. I've mandated school attendance. Previously, a large portion of our population did not attend school. We've created a 24-hour activity schedule to reduce the idle time. We utilize our dining facilities. Meals previously were had on the units, which made for very horrific sanitation issues on the units. We've engaged our social service coordinators. We've prompted them to be advocates as opposed to additional detention staff. We changed the dress code from detention officers' uniform to business-like attire. They're part of our administration. They're part of the daily briefings and late night. They work late nights and work weekend schedules. We have activity assistants, and we're changing their schedules to non-traditional work hours. Right now, the bulk of our staff are working between 8 and 2:30, which is school. The kids are structured during those times. We have our problems in the evenings and on weekends because of the lack of structure. So a lot of the programming staff, so to speak, will be moved to the evenings and the weekends so they can help structure the kids to eliminate the idle time. Our unit managers, there'll be a focus on training and the tactful redirection of staff, coaching, professional courage, and emotional maturity. When I say professional courage, we have a lot of staff that come from the ranks and they have their friends and associates that they kind of came up with, and there's a limited redirection in those situations. So we're building in those areas, all right? Okay, and we're encouraging management by walking around. We no longer have the office managers, the managers that sit in office as the day occurs. They need to be out and about and near where the action is. Continued changes, improvement on our suicide awareness policy and procedures. We've added a multidisciplinary team concept, special management plans to help youth with issues adjusting to being in detention. We've increased the protection of youth rights. We've enhanced our grievance policies with help from our quality assurance unit. We've implemented staff contacting me immediately if there's an allegation of abuse or misconduct. We've become consistent with searches in our behavior management system and our mandated housing classification system as mandated by the Ohio Administrative Code. We've limited isolation and reduced transition periods. When I got to the facility, anyone could just decide that a kid was going to be placed on confinement based on how their interaction was with that kid. That decision has come up to the administration. They have to get approval for kids to go on confinement, and it must be justified. Proper training for detention officers to increase both the frequency of training and the quality of training. We've created a due process hearing policy for major rule violations, increasing consistency and a sense of fairness for the youth that receive sanctions. It's really part of their rights before they have anything taken from them that they go through due process. We're identifying our security threat groups, our gang activity, so the staff can be familiar with the different trends and activities and hand signs and things associated with gang behavior. And we're pending some recommendations from the Center of Children's Law and Policy. Restructuring. We've hired a Deputy Director of Security this September. She comes to us, and her name is Jewel Jones. I'll have her make herself known. And she comes to us from ODYS, and she has years of experience in the field as well. We have Detention Training Department. We have a training manager, which is at a unit manager level. We'll have training officers who will take staff through the on-the-job training process so they can be initiated and learn the right things to do. As part of the restructuring, we have a due process staff. We have a due process manager. This position was filled by reallocating an existing position. We have due process hearing officers, which is part of the kids' rights before they receive a sanction to go through a due process hearing. And we have a behavior management coordinator, which is also part of the administrative code. We have an ombudsman and a grievance officer, and this addresses issues brought forth by the ACLU. The ombudsman is a position that's located outside of the detention facility because I didn't want someone inside of the detention facility investigating and looking into claims against the facility. Next step, we just recently received a 400-page document assessment, and we'll be reviewing it and making training recommendations. So if there are any questions.
That was the recommendation of the ACLU to have that individual on staff?
No, it wasn't, but the concerns brought forth about the conditions of confinement and the treatments of the kids in the detention facility and a prior experience I had with bringing that position, I recommended that position to the court.
Okay. And the name of the young lady that's,
Jewel Jones.
welcome. Anyone have any concerns, questions? Yes, ma'am?
Through the chair to Mr. Montgomery. Page 1, which department, I'm just telling you the pages of where I have the questions. Which department has consistent overtime? That's one of your goals.
Yes, those are detention officers.
Just detention officers?
Yes.
So I think you mentioned during your presentation that you're actually working with the employees to improve morale and things of that nature. So
Yes, ma'am.
which would cut down overtime. Page 2, I have 2 questions. When did you, under the changes in detention, when did you implement the dress code change?
This change went forth in June.
Okay, how's that working? We're only in August, September.
It's going over well with the majority. I would say 95%.
I'm assuming the 95% is the view of the employees like it.
Right.
How are the children reacting toward it?
Well, the goal in the dress change was to separate the detention officer from the professional staff, from the counseling staff.
Okay, so everybody had to wear one before.
Where everyone was wearing the detention uniform, and what I saw was kind of, as opposed to being an advocate, they were kind of like a second-level detention officer in the mentality.
Officers are still wearing their uniform?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
that's what I wanted to get at. Tutoring, so we talked, one of your things and changes in detention, I think your activity assistant. So where they're changing to non-traditional work programming activities until bedtime. Does that include any tutoring, accessing reading and math levels for the students?
Well, it includes reading and reading workshops and reading groups, but not specific tutoring. We have an educational program that identifies children that have deficiencies, and they do tutoring with them.
Because it's, just visited earlier, a little daycare center. What I don't like is this CMSD school system has moved out phonics. So if you have little children that are in preschool and they don't have phonics to learn how to read, and then we have students that are being pulled out of the society because I've had residents call me about that, out of society doing their penance for the crime that they've done. I think it's still our job, since they're kids, to make sure that when they leave out, they're going at their same level. So I'm glad that you do that. So that includes the educational, when they identify those students, they're identifying them on every level.
Yes, ma'am.
And are we connecting with CMSD and the I don't remember the new test name that they have, the OGT or whatever it is that it's not the OGT, but they have a new name. I don't have kids in school anymore, so I don't keep up, but they have a new name for the test that they have to pass at graduation. Because I'm assuming most of these children are around that age group where they're getting ready to graduate or something like that. So
Well, I'm not very familiar with the standards, with the educational standards here in Ohio yet.
Okay.
But I could get that information for you.
Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're, they're doing their time, but then when they leave out, they're not graduating. To connect those dots and to make sure that we're doing our part so they can still graduate on time.
Understood.
So number 3, I believe is probably my last question. In terms of the changes in detention, you had implementation of youth advisory board. I just wanted to know if they were from the children within, or they're from outside youth?
They're from the children within that are detained in the detention facility, and I meet with them and discuss their stay in detention and any grievances they have, any ideas they have for programming, basically to kind of advise me.
How are they selected?
Their social service coordinators select someone off their unit, and they represent the kids on the unit. They
Must have some sort of criteria how they identify which student would be in that leadership role.
Yeah, that's what I asked them, to find someone that can function in a leadership role, that can represent the other kids and bring forward their concerns in an appropriate manner.
Okay, and how long do they stay in that position?
We're doing it for a month right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, thank you for being here, Mr. Montgomery, and best of luck to you in your new capacity. And,
Thank you.
I just got a question as far as what's the average length of stay at the detention center for the offenders?
I think it's pushing a little over 32 days.
It's about a month, roughly.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you mentioned having somebody to monitor gang activity, that type of thing. Do you see that as a problem at that age group, or is it something that you have under control?
Well, it's definitely a problem right now in the detention facility. The gang activity is, and the lack of training for the staff to identify the gang activities. Having worked in Chicago area, Kansas City area, and Atlanta area, being familiar with the gang culture,
Right.
is definitely an issue when you have kids.
So is the objective with dealing with gang activity to isolate it and separate it from other people, or is it to try to change the mentality of the individual who's in a gang? I mean, how do you approach that?
It's first you try to mitigate the risk, and you use your classification system to house rival gang kids separately,
Right.
and then you put programming in place to talk about things related to being in gangs, namely esteem.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, it seems like it's something we just kind of pass over, but it's kind of like an underlying cancer at a facility like this. If you can't isolate that issue and deal with it in some reasonable capacity, because you're always going to be having, kind of watching other people and then watching those individuals who are caught up in that activity. So it's a real concern. It sounds like at least you have a plan in place for something like that, and it's unfortunate, but it's a reality we live in right now. And then as far as how many children do you have at the facility currently? How many people are there?
It's 103, and give or take, kids are coming and going.
Sure,
every hour.
coming and going, but roughly 100 individuals at a time. So, and then, so that's the number of, so what is the staffing level currently?
The staffing level currently is adequate. for 103. When I first got here, we were pushing 150, which was a stretch.
Okay.
Also, the fact that the kids were not going to school, you had to staff the school and you had to staff the housing units. So that you had to have staff in two places as opposed to one.
Okay. And then going back to kind of hitchhiking on what Ms. Conwell said as far as the schooling and education that they're getting. So who's actually doing the teaching right now? Is it like public school teachers, or is it?
Yeah, as a public school.
Public school teachers. And then, I mean, and are they coordinated with, I know that I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but are they coordinated with the schools that the children are attending currently? You know, so when they do hopefully get out and try to get back to normalcy, they can just kind of flow right back into their school program? Is that what the idea is behind that?
Yes, it
Just
is.
keep
It's an accredited school system,
Okay.
and the credits that they receive in the school go back to their school system.
Okay, because you
We've
just
even
don't,
had, since I've been here, we had about 3 or 4 kids graduate
okay.
from the detention.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. So, okay, I appreciate it, and continued good luck and success to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, and again, good luck in your profession. It's a very challenging job. I want to say I like the changes that you've made, and even though we kind of glide over them, change is hard. So mandating school attendance is, you have 30 days on the average with 103 attending. So mandating school attendance, I'm sure is difficult to enforce, but should be. And then creating that 24-hour activity, making sure there isn't idle time, and engaging students after they're finished with school and on weekends. Very, you'd think that that's what we should have been doing, so
Right.
thank you for putting that in place. Just a lot of what I see here of very smart ideas that I hope you continue to do, and I'm sure not always easy, but I think you're doing a service to our students that are there, and I wish you continued luck.
Thank you.
Going forward, with your experience with the COs and retention, is it finances that is the big bugaboo on them moving on?
With retention, I think it's structure. I think it's been structure and leadership. The staff want to work in an environment where they feel like they're safe. It's also morale. The staff want to feel appreciated. That being said, we did also start a employee appreciation program where we just noticed last month, Employee of the Month, and they got a parking spot. So just the small things, the pat on the backs, the thank yous, and I appreciate yous, and even when situations occur, having the managers come down to show support and give some talks to the kids, because sometimes they want to hear it from someone at a higher level as opposed from hearing it from the DOs.
And you're daily visible in
Yes.
pods?
I manage by walking around. You run into a lot of things sometimes that shouldn't happen in conversations, and you can redirect that. But the staff respect you for that.
Right.
If there's a pop sprinkler and I'm down there pushing water, then I expect everybody to push water. If it's a altercation and I'm down there redirecting kids, then they respect that and they move.
Good.
They move accordingly.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, and I'm glad that you're on our team.
All right.
Can I
Thank you,
ask
sir.
one more?
Yes, ma'am.
So on that point, at the detention center, as a suggestion, do you have parent meetings?
Well, that's something that we'll probably transition to. Right now, I put in the brief that we do the special management plans for the kids that are having a hard time adjusting to being in detention facility. And what we want to do is pull some of the parents into that. And in the future, also see case plans for kids, rolling out what they're doing in probation.
We don't have that now?
No, they don't. Like I was saying before, the social worker or social service coordinator had not taken on the traditional role of doing case plans like they do in most detention facilities.
Okay, and
So
that's
that's
my
forthcoming.
concern for the tutoring the individuals. So their educational levels, are the teachers that are from CMSD, are they stationary teachers?
Well, we
or do
have
they have subs coming in and out? And
No, they're stationary teachers, and we have We have our own town. We have a medical area, an educational area. We have an educational principal and other leaders, and we have subject matter teachers, special education, PE, everything that they would have in a regular school system.
Because many of these children, if we're not focusing on their education, they're gonna come on our roll somewhere else in the county.
Well, that's education is the primary reason, primary way for rehabilitation or habilitation in these kids' cases. That's why I push so hard for them all the kids to be involved in education and participate in education.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Ms. Lippman?
See if I can do the technical piece. All right, good afternoon again. So I wanted to take this opportunity to review some of the highlights that the court has had over the last fiscal year. We've done a lot of work on trying to increase our revenues and be better stewards of the budget that we received. And so we wanted to just really show you, because we have a lot of good news, and I know sometimes you guys don't get good news, so we wanted to be able to share that with you. So one of the things that in the budget process for this year that we talked about was using our special revenue funds. And what our commitment was to the county was to use 100% of our estimated revenue that was going to come in these special revenue funds, plus 25% of the balance that was there. So you can see in the different areas how much we were looking at. So that was about $3.4, almost $3.5 million that we were committed to spend down. So far through August of this year, between what we've spent and what we've encumbered in different contracts, we've gotten a little over $3 million committed to, or 88% of the target. And what we're using that money for is for a lot of IT things, since we're talking legal computerization and legal research. So it's contracts, it's licenses, hardware, software upgrades. We're doing some computer replacements. And then we also have some money that's committed for youth programming and community-based services. And these are all different kinds of expenses that normally would be covered through local funds. We also have created 7 new revenue streams, which I have listed there, and you can see how much each of those costs. And so far through August, that's been another $40,000 that have come into the court. So that's been very successful. We've been real pleased with how that's worked out. We have increased the court costs on our special revenue funds pretty much starting the end of 17, beginning of 18. So far, the increase in our revenue through August has been another $109,000. We instituted and we updated what we had for our indigent verification process. In the past, it was a little more not as specific or really had a very good nailed down process. So we've redone the documents, and we have a very specific process to check whether or not folks that come in, if they're really indigent or if they can pay court costs. So we're hoping that through that process, we can enhance the collections process. We have secured about $750,000 in new grant funds this year, and those are being used for youth programming. We have a lot of outstanding court costs, and so we're looking at those and sort of fine-tuning them, working with the Ohio Attorney General to send those for collection. So we're hopeful that some of that will be able to turn in some additional revenues as well. You just heard Mr. Montgomery talk about restructuring the detention center staff, that some of those positions were actually were new positions that were created, but they were filled by repurposing existing staff. So that was without savings of about $300,000 without having to create new positions and create new FTEs. We also have been working with folks on really nailing down our Title IV-E administrative claim. This is a claim that goes in quarterly to the state, and we've been able to really sort of dig into every dark corner to get reimbursed for everything that is really eligible for reimbursement. So in this calendar year, we've already brought in over $754,000. So the county takes 25% of that, so the county's portion is over $188,000. And the quarterly average reimbursement through us rejigging this is increased by about $60,000, just to give you a sense of that increase. We also initiated, we took sort of the county's lead and initiated a voluntary furlough program. This doesn't include detention center staff, but all the other staff at the court. And we did that without having any kind of impact on service to the public. The court also took over this year the custody mediation program that was currently being staffed and run by the county. So through that, our agreements through mediation have gone up 40%. The time from when an individual files, these are for private custody cases, the time from filing to completion of the mediation has increased by 50%. And we implemented all those changes by and large with existing staff. We had a couple new staff positions that had to come in, but by and large with existing staff. So that was a savings of about $350,000 from the previous year. And wanted to just also thank you all for giving us the opportunity to come here and updating you on the successes that we've had. We've done a good job of increasing our revenues and bringing down our expenses, and especially, with the consideration for those that affect the local funds, since we know that those are always decreasing and hard to come by. Additionally, in looking at all of the information that Mr. Montgomery has shared with you regarding the detention center, that really this is just sort of the first chapter of what we hope will be an ongoing conversation with the county and with county council specifically. We have a lot more changes that are coming down the pike. We have that report that we want to look at to see what that's going to sort of recommend and what makes sense for the county as far as those recommendations. And we would love to have an opportunity to come back and talk about that as well, and just to see if there's anything that you guys can do to help us in sort of meeting some of those goals that we think really make sense to have a good detention center, a good safe detention center that really meets the needs of the youth. And then lastly, since we're not really sure what the future conversations regarding budget for 2019 are going to be, we just wanted to take an opportunity to state that the 2018 budget that you guys worked with us to come to an agreement on is really sort of spot on for meeting our needs. And we feel confident that that budget moving forward for 2019 with the addition of the previously negotiated salary benefits, the 2%, would meet our fiscal needs in the next year. So we've already had a lot of conversations with OBM regarding that, but that's sort of our status of where we are. And I just want to thank you for indulging us and sharing all of our successes with you.
Any questions?
Only one?
This one, for me, anyway. Through the chair to Ms. Littman, from your mindset, are we looked at as more of a detention center or a rehabilitation center?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Are we looked at from the public or internal staff? Are we looking at it as a detention center only, or are we have the thought process for rehabilitation?
I think the most fair way to answer that is it depends who you ask. I think that a lot of people, when they think about the detention center, I think a lot of people don't have through lack of knowledge, don't have a good understanding of what the detention center really is. And I think through that, people that don't really have an understanding and people who do have an understanding have sort of a different point of view of what the detention center, what's purpose and goals were. And I think Mr. Montgomery did a good job of sort of talking about those goals in the beginning of his presentation. So I know it often creates a lot of interesting conversations about sort of direction, because some people do come at it from one camp and some people come at it from another camp. And depending on where your point of view is, that you sort of see things going in that direction. So I guess that's sort of the best way I can.
I guess I brought that up because I would like it to be viewed as a rehabilitation. I mean, we're dealing with kids. Their records will get sealed if they do what they need to do, and they have an opportunity, we have an opportunity to change them into being rehabilitated versus I'm just sitting here because I did something wrong, and are they really learning why they did what they did and how do they change when they're released back? And I know gangs are a total different thing. You look at that, you have to meet them financially because they're in a gang because either they were forced to be in one or they need some love or they need some money.
Right.
And so unless we can provide those things when they get out, most likely they're gonna be with the gang. So that's a special section.
If I can interject, I would just say that when a kid comes into the detention facility, it's the start of rehabilitation. We may not be able to offer the full gamut of services like they would get in a community residential placement, but it's the start. We should start assessing and start identifying some of the undertone issues while the kid is in detention or having some of the issues that they have and start putting things together for them for when they return to the community.
I wonder, can we change the name? It's kind of like we were talking about mental health earlier, how the stigma for mental health. I'm sure there's a stigma with being a detention center. Just thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
I'm not even sure if this is relevant right now, but we're talking about it. So is there any way you guys could provide us with, and this might be difficult even at this age, but the recidivism rates of the kids who come there? Are there a lot of repeat kids who come back, or we see a lot of new faces, or?
I know that there's a lot of youth that come back to the detention center.
Right.
That whether it's for the same offense or if it's new offense. I mean, it's certainly something we can look at and see, the number of visits youth have. I mean, part of with the same offense is that they may be released to home detention or to a shelter care and then they come back. So that's not, it's sort of the same continuum. I think what you're referring to is a youth comes in on a certain offense that's resolved, and then there's a new.
Right.
That's sort of what you're looking at.
Right. Exactly. Because just along the lines of what Ms. Conwell was alluding to, so if you're trying to change the mentality, the thought process of these kids early on, give them some hope, that sort of thing. You'd like to see the levels of recidivism dip down lower, so you don't have these same kids. Because if they keeps seeing them coming back, then perhaps their particular rehab it's not being effective or applied effectively, however you want to put it. So those are tax dollars that
Right.
continue to be used.
I know we look at that as well, even with our probation youth that maybe never hit the detention center, that they go into probation, they get whatever kind of services or whatever, and we do look at, do those youth, are they successful in that program? And,
Right.
and if they're successful, do they then, reoffend?
Right. And Ms. Conwell's commentary about rehabilitation, I mean, again, we all know that's a bigger issue in society as to how, what the purposes of, detention center in the first place. I mean, there's punitive element to it. There's, rehabilitation element to it. So that's just a bigger picture that we have to deal with, but always just being cognizant of our, the big picture. You know, we want to make sure we look at the big picture and what we're doing for these kids in the long run. So I know you guys are all aware of that. I'm preaching to the choir, I know. But just wanted to bring that up a little bit and talk about that. So thank you.
Okay. I think you're aware that as we move towards 2020, our budget's going to be not looking too good. I don't anticipate an answer, Judge, but I know the Chief Justice is doing some research on moving assets throughout Ohio as to where they're needed, specifically judicial positions, and even within the county, transferring to courts that need it, that are being overrun, basically. And I don't know where that's at, and I intend to send her a letter because, in my opinion, the assets financially that are needed in the courts are here. I just think they're just not adequately dispersed as to who's busier. And the Chief Justice is supposed to be moving on this, and I would anticipate sometime, I thought by now we would have it, but I would anticipate very near future that something needs to be done about this, because we quite honestly don't have the revenues to be dispersed further. And the seats themselves, I don't really care about that state, but the ancillary personnel that back up the courts that are quite honestly not necessary in many of them because they're just not that busy. But we have busier courts where those personnel should be. So we're hopefully gonna get some help from the state. I don't often say that because I have a relationship with the state since I've been here, not good. I don't think anybody can say it's been good, but we're hoping that in this instance it will be good and helpful. As 2019 approaches, do you have any concerns as far as your budget goes on coming back?
No, I mean, I think, like I said, we really appreciate, because I know there was a lot of negotiation, a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversations about our 2018 budget. I think that, you know, I've shown that we've really done a good job of utilizing our special revenues, increasing our revenues, you know, bringing in more dollars, and at the same time, you know, living within the means that were budgeted to us. And moving forward, I think those numbers really work for us in 2019 as well, you know, with the addition of the salary, the benefit there. But, you know, I think, you know, I know that juvenile court was sort of in a unique position when you guys voted on the 2018-19 budget, where we really didn't get a 19 budget, and there was something sort of put in there as a placeholder that really wasn't something that the court had any conversation a part of, because it was about us coming back and talking about how we're doing and how that budget was working, and you know, it's, you know, been really pretty much spot on to what our needs were. I mean, we certainly have had, you know, one-time bumps here and things there, but we've really been able to sort of ebb and flow with those changes to really stay within our means and not, you know, not be hurting or
Right.
crying badly.
Well, there's certainly things on our side that we're trying to address in-house. I think the next 15 months is going to be very important to the look of what justice looks like in Cuyahoga County going forward, starting with what we're doing with the Justice Center. We don't know. We're out of the loop. Strange, we're the ones that write the check, but we're out of the loop on that. I think that somebody needs to step up and make a decision and move that thing forward. As far as the amount of seats and what seats are going to be where and who's going to be where, that has to be addressed. So these are not easy decisions, I understand, but I think in the next 15 months we're going to have a clearer view as to which way we're going here in Cuyahoga County. And quite honestly, it's not sustainable the way it is right now. It's just not. And unfortunately, being the busier court that you are, you're on the back end of this. And that really should be changed and put around. So I think we're gonna work towards that to equalize where you're at and where the others are at to make things fair and provide the services that everyone needs to be provided through at least this committee and this council. So I appreciate you coming in. We appreciate the update. It's important to us to know what's going on. I'm glad Mr. Montgomery and his team now is in place. That gives us a little bit of comfort that at least that moving forward's in the right hands. And we wish you the best of luck there. If there is anything that you or the court needs, do not hesitate to contact any one of us. We are at your beck and call.
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Is there miscellaneous, or is there miscellaneous business? I will say, before we broke last time, I said if the committee would consider, I think going for next year, what I think we should focus on, and I've purposely been quiet and taken a back seat on some of these things. But I think it's important that we start moving forward, and I think, like I said, mentioned the Justice Center, what the courts are gonna look like, the jail situation that we have in the Justice Center is being worked on with the nurse situation. My understanding is there was a meeting yesterday, and we're hoping that situation will be taken care of. But if there's anything that is of interest to any of the community members, I'd like to know, is I'd like to have 2 or 3 things that we should concentrate on. And one also being the thing that I mentioned to Mr. Murphy is that psychological hospital that was on the boards, ready to go from the state, that went away for what reason, I don't really care right now. I think maybe we need to use our political will to at least try to get that discussion moving forward and get it back on the boards. Nothing further? Yes, ma'am?
Just bail bond reform.
Well, that's moving. That's over with the courts. Yet again, another committee. I'm going to be meeting with some of those folks, but right now, until I think we're invited into the process, which they will, because the last thing mentioned in every one of their meetings is that we have to pay for it. I would imagine that if we have to pay for it, it would be real important for us to be at the table. We're not at the table as far as I know, so they can do what they're gonna do and then come to our table and service up whatever they have for us, and we'll once again create the solution to their problem. Thank you.